There's still a lot of room for legal action to specify, what constitutes a deep fake, what's actionable, what might be criminal in terms of, deep fake or synthetic media. And it's got to be like an international scale, right, to be able to really fight it. So, I mean, all those things have got to come together. There's a huge, as you mentioned, huge societal, a huge technology wave, AI and the like. And so what's going to balance that out? It needs an equally big wave. I don't think it's you and I individually would be able to necessarily fight deep fakes or synthetic media. We're not going to be able to. I think we're barely able to now, but in a short period of time, we're not going to be able to tell the difference. I mean, you'll be looking at me on this video, on this Zoom, and I could be completely fabricated.
This is The Media Machine, where media, business, and innovation intersect. Hi, I'm Johanna Salazar, and I'll be your host as we examine the future of content, technology, and entertainment through the lens of 4 key pillars: process, profit, people, and planet. When tech and media companies and creators face high-stakes litigation or digital disruption, they turn to Luis Salazar, a veteran trial lawyer and strategist. Luis has protected the personal data of over 100 million Americans as a DOJ-appointed consumer privacy ombudsman in major bankruptcies, including Alamo Drafthouse. He's also helping shape Rule 707, a proposed federal rule that would govern AI-generated evidence like deepfakes and synthetic media. Featured in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, Luis is the advocate innovators trust when the future of their business is on the line. Based in Miami, he also makes a mean Cuban cafe. In this episode, we go deep on the real legal risks creators and media businesses face in a world where anyone's face, voice, or data can be replicated, remixed, or sold. We talk about what's changing, what's missing, and what we as builders and storytellers need to do to protect trust in the content we create. Luis, welcome to The Media Machine. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
The reason why I wanted to bring you on is because I feel like I speak to a lot of media executives, a lot of media people, and I always want to provide different point of views to what we're going through, what the world is going through. I feel like the world is revolving around media, but there's so many changes that a lot of us really just don't understand. And I figured who best. And just for clarity, we're not related. Salazar, Cuban, American, Colombian. We're not related, but it was really awesome to know that there's a Salazar law firm. So you said the legal system is not ready for AI-generated content. What's the biggest risk that you see with deepfakes and synthetic media that is impacting us today?
I think the real issue is that seeing is no longer believing. Right? That's the era that we're entering into because of deepfake, synthetic media. And I think the statistics, which I think are really hard to say whether they're accurate. Latest one I read is 8 million deepfake videos online at the moment. That's doubling every 6 months. Again, that seems a little bit light to me. Ultimately, the real issue is not the deception. It's the doubt that's created by those deceptions, right? So if you can no longer believe what you see or what you hear, and that doubt is kind of foundational to every interaction with media, I think that creates a big problem. It creates a big problem with trust for creators, for newscasters, for those who run government. For the law, it creates a foundational issue. If you cannot trust evidence in court, how can you come to a decision, right? So the establishing how we can overcome that lack of trust and kind of fight back against that doubt, I think is one of the biggest things we're facing in the next 10, 20 years in the age of AI.
Yeah. You've also written that AI, it could create a liar's dividend where no one believes anything anymore. Do you still believe this? And how close are we to this?
More than ever, right? More than ever. You can see it every day. I certainly did come up with liar's dividend. Someone referenced that, created that a few years back. And the specific meaning is that, in a world of deep fakes and synthetic media, liars get a dividend because anything that they do that they want to deny, they're on tape saying something awful or they on tape doing something awful, they can just say, well, that's not real. Right. So they get a dividend. And of course, the technology now allows you to flood the market with deep fakes, flood the internet with deep fakes to confuse it further, or even, use the exact accurate, take that exact accurate, what actually happened video and create a deep fake that looks exactly like it, but with metadata that says it's been tampered on. So there's a lot of ways to create more doubt and confusion. So look, for creators, for media, I think it has a profound effect, right? For brands, they can't, if nothing can be trusted, right? If everything's being, kind of fabricated, the doubt, again, to going back to that issue, doubt is the issue, not necessarily deception. I think that hurts value. If you're a documentary, someone who creates documentaries, or a newscaster, or even an influencer who likes to, who focuses on news or current events, same. I mean, that there's that trustworthiness issue is impacted. And, again, going back to our legal system, like something near and dear to my heart, you have, fundamental doubts about whether anything is true. I mean, you can just deny that's made up. And, there used to be, used to say this something called the CSI syndrome, or the CSI kind of obstacle. So when CSI came out, a lot of juries would believe that in every criminal case, there's like a forensic scientist that comes in and they have genetic data. And so prosecutors found that they had like an extra burden because people expected that to be on the stand, but that doesn't really happen in normal cases. I was in a criminal case. I was defending a 3-week fraud trial, and we made sure we had experts on there because they want to see it. They want to see it. And we know it's necessary, but it had an impact. It's the same thing. I think you see a liar's dividend. It's going to change people's perceptions. So when they're sitting to decide on a case, they're going to look and say, I'm going to doubt that evidence. No matter what you tell me, judge, that this has been vetted and it's authentic, I just don't believe it. And I think you're going to see a lot of that for a considerable period of time until a series of things can be done, I think, to combat deepfakes. That's not really happening yet. But I think maybe over time we do address it, and it's going to then we'll be able to balance it out. But I think the impact of it is going to be profound.
Yeah, that is the one thing that kind of really freaks me out, because I was listening to this big podcaster, and he was saying that when his podcast became massive and global, that all of a sudden people were using his name and likeness and creating tons of deep fakes about him and then charging people for stuff. So these people are making money off of him, and they're selling, like snake oil. And so he goes after one, and it's like a game of guacamole. Like, then there's another one, and there's another one, and another one. So what can these people do today? Like, how can a consumer protect themselves from this?
Yeah, among the things that can be done is, and I think needs to be done, is greater development of technology to spot deepfakes and synthetic video for consumer use and more. Again, there's things that can be done that businesses do, that I mentioned, audio and email tracking. There's things that you can do to kind of vet out what's fake. But I think I'm not aware of any kind of broad-based technology to do that. But that's necessary. I think there's going to be some kind of like equivalent of like a deep fake literacy training, whether you try what can you do to spot it. I think that has to evolve. And there's still a lot of room for a legal action to specify, what constitutes a deep fake, what's actionable, what might be criminal in terms of, deep fake or synthetic media. And it's got to be like kind of international in scale, right, to be able to really fight it. So, I mean, all those things have got to come together. There's a huge, as you mentioned, huge societal, a huge technology wave, AI and the like. And so what's going to balance that out? It needs an equally big wave. I don't think it's you and I individually would be able to necessarily fight deep fakes or synthetic media. We're not going to be able to. I think we're barely able to now, but in a short period of time, we're not going to be able to tell the difference. I mean, you'll be looking at me on this video, on this Zoom, and I could be completely fabricated.
That's true.
Yeah. How would you?
Exactly. I was reading about Rule 707. Can you tell us a little bit about why that's something that people in the media space need to care about? And also how how the courts are handling digital evidence? Sure.
Well, so Rule 707 is kind of a subset of the problem. What has happened in the law, which I think is happening, kind of writ large in society, is the problem of a fake and in court is hallucinated, evidence, hallucinated cases. So we've had a whole bunch of situations where lawyers are turning to AI, asking the AI to draft a brief, and the AI will just fabricate law to support a proposition. They submit it to the court, they get in trouble. But now we're seeing judges are citing cases that contain fabricated evidence. So it's an issue that kind of fundamentally infects the court system, and so it's drawing a lot of attention, and therefore attention to AI. What 707 does is it focuses on actual output from AI. So as an example, you go and use AI to summarize documents, or go a little further, maybe use it to calculate, damages or the present value of a certain stream of income. All things that you can easily ask, ChatGPT to calculate for you. So what 707 does is say, in situations where you're trying to introduce that evidence into court, you have to show it's reliable. It's based on established methods and it's being applied reliably. That's hard to do when the AI is in a kind of like a black box. So the good part of that is that there's a screen to try and protect against just that kind of evidence. The downside is that it's also an obstacle for using technology that might make you kind of level the playing field with folks who cannot necessarily afford an expert to come in and present that same evidence. So again, it's a very evolving area. I think for creators, the issue is coming down again to reliability, trustworthiness of content that's created.
So ultimately, it's protecting who?
It's protecting all of us, right? Because when you think about it, what's fundamental to, let's say, the court system. Also, more broadly, the content creators and developing trust. But for the court system, it relies on evidence, and that evidence has to be authentic and reliable, right? If it's not those two things, it should not be part of what's considered to make decisions. So it's fundamental to the process that there be a method to make sure that the evidence that's being put before a jury or someone who's deciding a case is accurate and reliable. 707 is one of the efforts to attempt to do that. Look, our whole judicial system has many rules to try and vet out fake evidence, digital evidence. The challenge is that it's become so good, so seamless, that catching it before it infects a case or infects evidence is going to be the real challenge.
I was reading something about, you were writing about the 23andMe case, and the reason why I thought of this was because we recently had another person on the podcast who worked on the product side at 23andMe, and he spoke about it from that angle. So I was really curious to hear from you because I know that you were talking about, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you were talking about bankruptcy and how, like, what we've learned about consumer data rights. I want to know how has your background helped you really come in and inform industries that are outside of just, real estate and bankruptcy cases?
The joys of being a lawyer is that our practice and our careers can be very varied. So I've spent about what I like to do now, what I do heavily now is what they call high stakes litigation. So I take on very challenging cases. Sometimes that involves financial restructuring. A lot of time it's in court. It can be internal investigation. So it's a very broad category, building on my experience. But I spent 20 years in the data privacy space and advising companies on how to use data, including media companies, marketing companies, direct response companies, and the like. So my experience is kind of broad in that area, and it touches on the topics that you're referring to. So 23andMe, which for me, 23andMe is like the seminal case for what I've done. It's data privacy, the privacy of individual data, and bankruptcy, where those two things meet. We're going to look back on it as yet another kind of watershed moment for a couple of reasons. Well, one, it was really the battle between value and privacy. Because that asset, that genetic data, which is intensely private, has also a considerable value. That was the heart of the case. Tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in value. Whether that company could sell it over potential objections or concerns of regulators, et cetera, was one of the key issues. And ultimately, for a whole variety of reasons, it was sold. So if you're investing in a company that gathers data, if you're lending against a company that has data as its primary asset, that's kind of a vindication. This model works. Had the opposite been true, I think it would have felt repercussions in a lot of different industries. We can't have a company with data because go into bankruptcy and all your data suddenly is meaningless, or privacy concerns will trump your consents if you got them from folks when they give you that data. So I think we're going to look back and see that that's a moment where the economic and legal system focused on this issue and said, this company got the right consents, followed the law correctly. So I think that's where 23 for consumers. So the terms and conditions mean something. When you give up your data, you're being asked to consent to do certain things, including the resale of your data. So those terms and conditions, which we often just click through, and I'm guilty of it as well, they mean
Yeah.
something, they're lasting, and they could be very hard, if not impossible, to step back from once you've consented.
The fact that we're smarter now about how our data is being used and who's taking it, do you think that there's going to be a shift where now people are going to be removing their data, or companies are going to be forced to make it a lot easier for us to remove our data? Is that happening, or is that going to
I,
happen?
I do not see that, because I think
Mm,
there's a very kind of robust and established laws and regulations and best practices around consent and the like. So I think companies are going to continue to collect data, and the vast majority of them collect data in circumstances that we're not really truly aware of. So, many years ago, I think it was 2 decades ago, the CEO, I think it was Sun Microsystems, said privacy is dead. Get over it, right? And that kind
mm,
of created a brouhaha. But when you think about it, because of how pervasive the data collection is, I mean, there's companies that have tons of data about us. They're selling it back and forth. We have no awareness of that whatsoever. Because how pervasive that is, and I think people's perception that it's pervasive. I think while people may be cautious in certain circumstances, they're very not cautious in others. Right? They're giving away their data. They're checking the box. They're giving their phone numbers and the likes. I think we're still in that flux period in between where a lot of people don't really care. They'll give away all their private information and sign up for a website or a service or an app and willingly give up all kinds of information to be able to use it.
that's true.
Yeah,
I personally give my data away all the time whenever I see
sure.
download this free report and it's an amazing report and I
Yeah.
want it. I literally give my email away to everybody that gives me those free reports.
Yes. Yes. It's gonna be look. It's you could go home and you can listen to vinyl records and never use a music streaming service, right? But music streaming services are really convenient. So as what's the trade? They monitor what you listen to. They keep a record of it. They build profiles about you when you listen to it. So I've made that decision that I think that's worth the trade. I really find that having this on my phone is really amazing, and so I'm okay with that. But and we replicate that again and again. So there's not a hard line where I think or a fundamental shift in law or in society because of 23andMe or the like, where everyone's saying, don't give up. I'm not going to give up my data. There's some data that I think is intensely personal, sure, genetic, sexual behavior, race and ethnic identity. Some people are very cautious about giving that out because it can be misused. I think those are still going to be hot button issues. But beyond that, I think it's, where it's kind of downhill. We're getting more information for the services. We're used to it. And I think we're just not as reluctant anymore.
Yeah. So staying on the consumer privacy theme for a little bit, I don't like this term, consumer surveillance.
Yes.
But that's what media and brands do often. That's how they make their money. That's how they grow their products.
Yes.
Anybody that's building technology, I mean, I know this very well. My husband and I build technology all the time. You're constantly building in systems and integrating systems to be able to understand audiences, audience preferences, and to be able to really super serve clients, customers, and everybody. So it's like a double-edged sword. But where's the ethical and like legal line, do you think, for media companies?
I learned from one client, for example, that when you call into a call center, how you press the button and how long is also unique to you. So they can build a profile based on pressing the buttons for like the select press 3 for so and so. They can build a profile around that and the background noise. It's really fascinating. Your fundamental premise is correct. There's tons of information that can be gotten from kind of biometric factors and physical factors like behavior, where you are, how you hold the phone, and the like. So what's fundamental about it? Companies are not going to stop doing that for the reasons you say, right? So one is, what's the trade? I think you have to be able to clearly say, this is what I'm giving you in exchange for this particular data, right? To be transparent about it. So to what we were talking about a little bit earlier about streaming services, right? As an example, I get home and I look at my phone. I want to play something, and I'm kind of shocked that they keep thinking that apparently I only listen to Ibiza chill playlists. But you know what? I immediately play that because that is what I listen to. They're right. That's why my preference. I like to hear that at night. So that's a trade. I know they're grabbing my information, but they're creating these playlists that I enjoy. So that's okay. Then I get that trade. I have on the other hand, I have a a Bluetooth light bulb. And that Bluetooth light bulb, they get all kinds of information before you could turn it on. And I don't see the trade. Like, why do they need to have my phone number in order to know, to me to use this light bulb? Because they want to know when I go to sleep, who I am, and they build a whole profile. I don't see that trade, right? So at an ethical level, on a practical level, I don't see that the value there. That's what you have to be able to do if you're collecting data. Be able to explain, this is why it's good for you. This is why you can enjoy it. This is why you're getting value as a consumer. Legally, it's not too distinct. You want to have consent. You want to explicitly advise the consumer what you're gathering, get their explicit or implicit consent, and use it in accordance with that particular disclosure that you've made fundamentally.
Has there been a story that maybe that you can share with us that's challenged your thinking around consent, media misuse, and manipulation? Is there a case that you can share with us?
There is one case that did that for me that I was not actually directly involved in. So 25 years ago, when the .coms went bust, there was a company called ToySmart.com affiliated with Disney, and they were selling educational toys online, and they went into bankruptcy, and they decided to sell the data, even though their privacy policy said we're never going to sell the data, right? And the data, of course, was of kids, so it was terrible. So long story short, as a result of that, I heard about the case, and I drafted a law called the Privacy Policy Enforcement and Bankruptcy Act, and it was passed in 2003 and became part of our bankruptcy code. And it created really the only position of this kind. In a bankruptcy case like in 23andMe, the Department of Justice is empowered to appoint a consumer privacy ombudsman to go in and report to the court and review. As a professor was reported in Missouri for the 23andMe case, to report to the court on privacy issues. So it was not quite an advocate for privacy, but at least for specific data privacy, but an advocate for privacy in general. I've served in that role about 25 different times. So I know in my own case, I've protected hundreds of millions of data files from consumers. There's been many other ombudsmen, so I think it's been really helpful. And it also had a change in that privacy policies now, like we talked about before, explicitly say, here's what we're going to do with your data. That changed and improved and became more specific because of this law and because of the fear that they might lose data, like they might not be able to sell data. So I think it's had a really good effect, focusing people on what happens to your data downstream if something happens to your company. So I think that one case, which I just read about in the news back then in the newspaper, because it was barely an internet, really had a profound change on me, profound change on the legal system, profound change on how we handle data. And as one that, really I thought about differently, like how can we embed in the system something that will protect it and make it work better, make people more comfortable with it. This ombudsman position, I think it's been very successful.
Speaking about the past and disrupting, so you created the Lawgile Method. Tell us what that is and why you've been such a visionary in your space. What made you embrace technology so early on before almost anybody in your industry did? And what have been some lessons that you learned from that?
I went from a very large law firm with thousands of lawyers to a smaller one, intentionally so. So how does a smaller firm or an individual creator, same idea, how do they survive in an environment where you're up against larger media companies, or in my case, larger law firms? Technology is a factor, but there's a threshold issue. Right? You want to, which is teams and people, right? So the Lawgile focuses, it's an agile project management based method that instead of having kind of top down, me telling people what to do, it's a flat method. Everyone's invested. Everyone, is involved in managing the legal project, which is the cases, or it might be a contract, it might be a compliance review, whatever it is. So it engages people. It makes the work more fulfilling. They're more connected to what they're doing. And so that's a fundamental thing for me, like to be agile as a creator and the like. The technology is there in all kinds of ways. And we were the first, I think because we were agile, we were one of the first companies to use artificial intelligence back in, maybe 10 years ago. We were using Ross Intelligence, which was an AI-driven legal research engine. But we did that because we were able to move quickly. We were able to adapt and adopt new technology that was out there. And then so it's that agile mindset. It's that, that team integrity and vision that really helps you survive these challenging times and prosper even in the face of really big competitors that appear to have more resources and more technology. That's also, in this area where the technology, or in this era where this technology is changing so rapidly, and it's use cases are popping up left and right. I think agility really equals speed, because the focus is on what systems do you use to get things done, and how do we make that better? How do we improve it so it's faster, so we're more productive with less resources? And I think for anyone who's trying to survive in a changing environment, being able to do that, to focus on that cycle where you're improving, changing, adapting in a faster way. I mean, that's the thing that'll be key to staying, keeping your head above water, and then even better yet, prosper.
I want to come back to bankruptcy and tie it to media. You've been, you just told us you've been involved in these very high stake litigation cases and for decades. So this is your specialty. Looking at the landscape, the media landscape, do you foresee any media companies that are either going through bankruptcy or might be going into bankruptcy from your point of view?
Well, not any specific companies that I care to mention, but I'd say yes. Are there? I think we're going to continue to see the same pressures that are playing out with you because of streaming, because of the digital platforms, and still that slow move from TV and cable into those technologies, where there's a very few leaders, few profitable companies so far. I think you'll continue to see that pressure. I think the cost of production, I think the media companies are highly leveraged still, have huge overhangs of debt. Warner Brothers is a great example of that. Now they're spinning off their streaming and separating the companies to try and save kind of shareholder value. So I think you're going to continue to see that for the foreseeable future. I think that also applies to creators. And their content is, what they can make on content is being squeezed. AI is going to, the flood of content coming from AI, the fact that anybody can make, graphic pieces for me for posting. I used to rely on someone to make that. Now I just go to an AI and they'll create it. So that's kind of making cheaper product. We have to do more product if you're a creator to try and keep up. And just a series of those kind of pressures, I think, are going to continue to, unfortunately, pressure creators, folks like my son, who's a producer, and others that are going to continue to work through this kind of rough time until we get to whatever that new normal might be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. You just started saying some things that obviously it's making you guys more, or it's improving your efficiencies by using some of these new technologies. Do you foresee any trends, or are you seeing any trends that are coming up in the next 6 to 12 months that you think people should be really looking out for, like laws and regulatory shifts that you see?
The big thing we're going to see is just kind of a disconnect. So there's fragmentation between what's happening at different levels. So, federal government enforcing, not enforcing certain things, states enforcing different regulations. So I think it's going to be very much a kind of a minefield of what exactly you want to focus on. I think you're going to continue to see a lot of child online protection. I think you've seen e-laws passed successfully that's been upheld. So I think we're going to see more of those. I think we're going to see a lot more. There's a concern now in the last bill, the big, beautiful bill that was passed. There's a lot of focus on foreign actors in artificial intelligence and technology companies. I think that's going to be a big focus. Who's investing in those companies? Because they're an incredible asset. And for sure, there are companies all around the world, countries all around the world are trying to get in on AI technology, wherever it might be, and get that technology. So that's going to be a big issue. And I think you're going to have continued issues with, copyrights, around AI technology, what's created, what it's using. That's going to continue to unfold. There's a bunch of cases still rolling up through the court system. I think are going to have a big impact on how AI is trained. So all that's going to really unfurl. And again, in this environment where it's unclear who's enforcing, who wants to enforce what, federal government, state governments, local governments. So who's going to come and knock on your door still open in for a lot of these areas.
Do you feel excited about where the world is going, or are you worried or terrified? How do you feel?
Or all the above?
Or all of the above.
Is that an option? No, I think it's I think there's going to be a big disruption in terms of work. I think there's going to be also at the same time that's going to come with tremendous benefit and productivity. So I try and keep it in perspective when when I was a younger person, and there was the internet, and I was like, wow, it's going to change everything. It's going to be horrible. And then there's just, cell phones and mobility and work from home and all these things were going to end the world. And they didn't quite do that. And the economy kept growing. So is there a possibility that because of, AI agents that we're all going to be 10 times more productive? Yeah, it could be. Is there going to be a lot of shakeout? I think there will. But, net, is the economy going to grow as a result? So we all have more jobs, different jobs. I'm hopeful that that's where we're going to end up. But it's, it's pretty scary out there. Yeah, I'm sure you're seeing it in the legal space. We're seeing how, there's got some great product coming in. So if I don't need to be around to write a brief, maybe I don't need someone to write it for me, I can just ask an AI to create drafts. That's going to impact, people's jobs.
I think the whole AI revolution is just making everybody crazy right now. What protections do you think creators and media companies or anybody who has a business who is embracing media, what should they be thinking about, especially when it comes to AI for storytelling and appearing in videos that are generated with all these new tools? What should they be thinking about and watching out for?
As creators and producers and who are folks who are relying on content is, think of it like a business. I mean, you should think of it as you Inc. Right? So what you want to be able to produce content that is that's an asset that's going to continue to generate income streams, and it's reliable. So just like you buy gold or jewelry or a home, these are things that continue to have value over time, maybe even generate value or income. So you want to copyright and trademark your work. You want to use some of the new blockchain technologies that show that you created it. You want to be careful what platforms you're putting your work out in, because you may not own it, right? You may be able to lose it pursuant to the terms and conditions. You want to diversify your platforms, right? You want, just as a practical matter, if you're all in on one platform and they change their terms and conditions, or they, for some other reasons, you get sideways with their use policy.
Cap cut.
Yeah, you're done. Right?
Cut.
Now what? Right, exactly. So that's a big risk. And you want, again, get it all in writing. If you're of critical concern, you mentioned, is your likeness. You get that. I think in a world of AI, you've got to control it as much as possible. If if you're more in front of the camera or an influencer and the like, you want to make sure if you're appearing somewhere that you limit the likeness, you limit the ability to reuse it or manipulate it with AI later, and control that. That's a big asset of yours. And again, I think it's a trademark, copyright, build in equity into what you're creating.
One last question. When I was researching you, when I was doing your research, one thing that really stood out was you're such a good person. Like you have such incredible values, and it's so refreshing to see an attorney who's Latino, who has such incredible values. And you speak about your father, and it seems like you're really like a big family man. What, from that point of view, or maybe what was one advice that your dad gave you that you want to share with us?
So that's very kind of you. Thank you. I like to think everything you say is true. I want to think what I'd say that I couldn't point to a particular saying that I'd say, well, your dad told me this and I remembered it forever. There's many, but I think it's the example that he gave and what he exposed me to. So, before the show started, we talked about, where we're from. And I spent 15 years working in Washington Heights and New York at a small dry cleaners with him, and being in that front line and interacting with people and experiencing New York in that way. And what how that kind of tough, manual labor, I think you replace that. So what I've learned most from all that is to value all the great stuff that I have, all the great opportunities that created for me, and, all the good things in my life now, because I could be cleaning someone's clothes, which is hard work, especially in the summer with the steam machines going. So I value, a lot of people can be grumpy about, oh, I'm a lawyer, complain about it. But I always say, this is wonderful. And I think that's a value, a gift that my old man, should really gave me, is the opportunity to see that difference and value where I am now and what I've accomplished.
I love that.
Yeah.
I follow Cody Sanchez on Instagram.
Yeah.
She's a big entrepreneur and a creator. And she talks a lot about, the blue collar jobs. All these baby boomers are retiring, and a lot of them don't, their kids either don't want to take over the business, or they
Crazy,
don't have
right? Yeah.
they don't have anybody to take over the business. So they're saying, if you want to own a business, go after these retirement businesses. So now I'm looking at a laundromat. Luis, thank you so much for being here. This has been I've been waiting for this conversation for a long time. So thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Where can our audiences find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. So look me up there. Luis Salazar, Miami attorney. You won't miss me. I publish quite a bit. As you know, I try and keep active on there. And if you just also just on the internet, Luis Salazar, attorney Miami, you'll get all my information and more than you can handle, I'm sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful for your time. I appreciate you, and I'm sure you'll be back. Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care.
Bye. This conversation with Luis Salazar left me with both a sense of urgency and a renewed respect for the people quietly working to protect the foundation of trust in media. We talked about deepfakes, data privacy, surveillance, and consent. But at the core, this was about responsibility. As creators, as innovators, as leaders, what is our role in a world where anyone's voice, likeness, or story can be manipulated by code? Luis helped us understand that AI isn't just a creative tool or a business edge. It's a legal flashpoint. Rule 707, the 23andMe case, the collapse of media brands, these are not abstract scenarios. They're here. And if we're not paying attention, the platforms we're building today could become the cautionary tales of tomorrow. Come back for the next episode. See you on the Media Machine podcast. Thank you. Thanks for listening to our show. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us at the Media Machine Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. The Media Machine is hosted by Johanna Salazar. Our producers are Mia Vinciguerra and Johanna Salazar. This episode was edited by Adriana Saravia. This episode features music from Envato Elements. Thanks for listening.